All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode with another incredible guest. We have Dal in the house. She is nutrition coaching by Dal. If you've seen her on Instagram, she's a mom. She happens to have lost 110 pounds naturally, and she coaches others on how to make permanent lifestyle changes, just like she did. So I am so excited to pick your brain, Dal. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Very, very welcome. I love having people that have walked the walk because unfortunately there are so many nutrition coaches out there that are like, I'll teach you the way. And then when it comes to empathizing and understanding, they just don't get it because they've never walked a mile in their client's shoes. Meanwhile, you've walked several miles in everybody's shoes. So I'd love to just kind of get your story, and like, I know everybody listening will pick up at least one or two things along the way. So like, where did you start your official journey?
Officially, about over 2 years ago. But unofficially, most of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I yo-yo dieted and probably tried every extreme diet out there for over 2 decades. But officially, it was just in the last couple of years or so, and just learning to do it differently. And I always say the right and the long way. So,
Yeah.
and here we are, 110 pounds later. It wasn't like a continuous deficit that I was in, so I took my time with it, took some breaks, and still going.
I love that, the right and the long way, because that's got a double meaning that I really love, because people don't really understand that doing these short term solutions, these quick fixes, are really the longest way possible.
Yes. I remember like doing a post about this, and it was like often all of the quick fixes and all of these short-term solutions that you're doing, they still take time, and then you just revert back to your old ways, end up in that same vicious cycle. And for me, so what you just said totally resonates, because for me it took over 2 decades.
Yeah.
So yeah, versus 2 years, right?
Yeah. And I know you have lost like 40 to 60 over and over again. It was just kind of like that vicious cycle. What allowed you, because I mean, that's not that small amount of weight. Like, that's a very significant amount of weight. What allowed you to lose all that? And then what was like the reason it just kept coming back?
Well, it was always this desire to get the weight off, due to something, like whether it was a vacation or someone's wedding or something big coming up. And so that was the main focus. And the reason behind that was also that, I just thought that I had to be a certain body shape, size, and I wasn't comfortable otherwise. And so that was what the driving force was. And so it never stuck. And I never learned I never learned the nutrition or evidence-based nutrition side of it. And then, so doing it this time, there was more motivation behind it, more intrinsic motivation, not just like an external thing that I was, reaching for. And I know 40, 60 pounds, that's a lot. And so sometimes I always say, like, it's not that a person lacks discipline or the motivation or the skills, right? Like, we hear perseverance and this and that. I had all that. The reason I was able to learn or lose 40, 60 pounds over and over again is because I used those skills. They just weren't in the right way, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and then it was immediately just going back to the old ways, right? Once the event was over, once the vacation was over, that's it. Back to, eating like shit, not exercising, not doing the things that I should have been doing.
Normal eating.
Yes, exactly, right? Normal eating.
Yeah, but I love how you said that, because I think a lot of people miss the point when they're like, oh, because I'm overweight, I'm this lazy person, I just can't do the job. But it's like, meanwhile, you excel at work, or like you're the world's best parent, or super charitable. And you're like, you've got all these great qualities in there. It's just you need to learn how to apply them in this way.
Yeah, imply them in this context, right? Like, I spent years diverting my attention to things like organizing, or my kids, or just people pleasing, that whole people pleasing mentality that a lot of us tend to have and grew up with. And yeah, and so the attention was always to other people or to other things, and it was almost a distraction, right? Like I don't know, I guess cheap dopamine hit. So, if we're chronic shoppers, right? I did that too in my life. Trust me, my addictions have changed, right? Or things that I used to distract myself changed over the years. And so for the longest time, it was just doing everything for everyone else. And now that I can reflect back, I see it was more of an excuse or a reason just not to do the thing that I know I needed to do, right? And I didn't want to
Hmm.
face the things that I knew I needed to face as well internally in order to move forward. So yeah, I know
Yeah.
there's a lot there to
No,
unpack.
I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of times when it comes to people on their weight loss journey, they're fighting the wrong demons. This is just when you're eating a lot or you're doing the shopping or whatever, and you're doing it for that dopamine hit. It's to take place of something else. It's a manifestation. It's not the source.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's just a huge kind of like self revelation or realization that one has to have. And that was big for me because when I decided, you know, to do it this way, it was literally just waking up and saying, and this is literally what I did. I woke up and said, enough is enough. Like I need to change. Changes need to be made. But that also meant that I had spent the night thinking about, like, can I swear? A little bit? No.
No fucking way is
Okay.
any of that shit allowed on this goddamn podcast, okay? I have a very fucking strict rule.
I'll take that as a yes. So I just literally fucking woke up and I was like, fuck, I just can't do this shit. But I spent the night in my head going over the fact that I'm gonna finally have to deal with those internal struggles and demons that I've been suppressing all these years with food and booze. And subconsciously and deep down I always knew, and I believe that we kind of all know, but we're just afraid. We have that fear that holds us back from confronting that and doing that thing. Food is just used to either distract ourselves or for comfort, right? And that's what I did. So yeah, I think it's something that we all really have to take a step back and realize, like, this isn't just a physical journey, right?
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
emotional one too. So
100%. And I
yeah.
know I saw a post that you made a while back about like how you said it wasn't like even your doctor, your parents, your physical appearance, your kids, like nothing was like really enough to get you to that point. So like what was like that switch clicking moment?
Yeah. So without going too deep into it, it's true. All these years, my parents, you know, great people. My mom more so. It's usually the mom. Initially, it was more like that. You get the comments, the physical ones, or maybe you should look like this, or maybe you should dress like this, or maybe you should do that. But over the years, it changed, and it was more empathetic and just coming from a place of compassion and just real concern, right? And so even my doctor didn't really push it at all, which I get. It always talked about it, but didn't really force it down my throat. Um, and even looking at myself, I looked at pictures, but I didn't really look at them. Like I would kind of glance at them and just, never really look back. I avoided pictures all the time. And so, yeah, nobody could force me to change. I had to do it myself. And that was a part of that confronting, hey, like, you got to do this. You got to do this for yourself now. Like, you got to choose you. You can't do this for anyone else. And no one's, I have kids or my parents or no one's, they always say no one's coming to save you, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
No one can do it for you, right? Like there's a lot of different types of coaches out there, tough love, fear based, but none of that stuff works. It has to come from a place of compassion. And so I learned very early on in my journey that I had to be kind to myself and I had to give myself a lot of grace. And dealing with those internal things. A lot of people don't need to seek help. A lot of people do. I did, right? I'm not, I'm not, I'm going to share my story truthfully, and I had to, right? Like I had to talk to someone to kind of get me through that, and I didn't do it alone. I always say, and that's another thing, like all these years I did it alone. Like, I'm going to go do this and I'm just going to go for it. And I never shared my struggles. I never shared what I was really feeling. When the first time that I did, even, with my sister, it was 2 decades had passed. I often think back, like, what if I had just spoken up? Right.
Yeah.
But that is what it is. Right.
Hey,
So, I mean,
hindsight is 2020.
yeah, yeah, it is.
And I like how you brought up the fact that it had to come out of a place of self-compassion and understanding, because I think, at least in the beginning of this journey for a lot of people, and a lot of people stay stuck here for years and years, where it's like, I need a hard ass. I need somebody to slap stuff out of my hands. I need somebody to belittle me and to shame me, because that'll get me moving.
Yeah.
But when that happens, it's, again, short term. When you hate yourself, you do things to hurt yourself. So
Yeah.
that's usually where that ends. And if anything, when they get the results that they want through this approach, they lead by fear to keep them, not a sense of empowerment or improvement. So how did you get from that place of like, okay, I just gotta like starve myself, I gotta cut all the carbs out, I gotta do all this stuff, and now you're like, okay, I'm gonna do this the right way? Like, did you have a lot of those old school thoughts of like carbs are the enemy and all that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is just it, like, just to go back a little bit and then come back to this. We come from a place where, like, we think we need, we hate ourselves into being skinny or the smallest version of ourselves. This is the thing, though, like, we've already been doing it to ourselves. So for me, like, over 2 decades, diet culture has already, put that on me. Like, the way that I've grown up, or the things that I've grown up with or around, or what, our moms or aunts or our cultures, they've already been doing it. They've been doing it for years. That was a part of the journey as well, right? It's not just us. And then to boot, to top it off, we add our thoughts and the way we talk to ourselves on top of that, right? And so it makes it worse, right? But
Yeah.
moving forward, now, what was the second part of the question? Totally forgot.
Oh no, that's
Trying to
okay.
keep it.
Basically just asking, like, how do we get from that place of like the diet
Yeah.
culture rules to like, okay, I'm going to do this to make myself better and do this on a principles based approach like calorie deficit and things like that, rather than just saying I'm going to follow this method that sounds sexy and is the new shiny object.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of that comes from mindset shifts, right? For me, my personal experience, I can't say that that happened automatically for me either. I started off which counting points, and I soon realized. Well, I didn't realize it right away. Actually, 6 months into my journey, I started training with Andrew. Right, so I took up personal training. As I did that, we talked a lot about nutrition, and I started immersing myself a lot more into the nutrition aspect of it. And just in having those conversations with my coach, I started to realize that, okay, like I wasn't, when I say under eating, I don't mean I was like under eating and I wasn't losing weight. I was, but I was under eating in the sense that I could have been eating more and still losing weight. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I took that upon myself and started cross-referencing what I was doing with that based on actual calories, and then I saw that, okay, like I can actually eat more. And then
Yep.
slowly through my journey, I started moving towards that side of fitness, like the boring basic stuff, right?
Yep.
Which we take so much for granted. And it's a shame because I think most women just don't realize, one, that there is a better way and you can eat more and still lose weight, because they've always lived in one extreme, right? Not eating a lot and then just eating way too much. And so that that was big for me. How you get that information out? So I mean, we're all doing it, like a lot of us coaches, we say the same things, and it's just, how do we get that information out so people actually read it and take it in and actually practice it? I don't know. I think
Yeah.
that's where the disconnect is, right? There's
It's tough.
so much shit out there, and I mean, we can go down like a rabbit hole with this one, but all of these other influencers saying, do this, do this, do this. And so, what is it about us that's making us gravitate towards that? And I think it comes back down to that whole quick fix
Yeah.
mentality. And then when you look at that quick fix mentality, well, where does that come from? Why do we
Hmm.
have that? Because it's a mindset thing, right? Or it's like an internal thing. So it's a lot deeper. It's not as simple. It is for some people, it can be, if they just gravitate towards that type of information and that knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
I think
complex. It's deep rooted.
I think one of the very common things that does happen that leads to like this quick fix mentality is the catastrophization mentality, where it's like, all right, it's not that bad. And then it's like, all right, it's getting a little bad. It's a little worse. Oh my God, I'm about to lose my mind. I got to lose this weight. I got to get in shape. Oh my God, what's the quickest way to do that? Oh, this quick fix fad diet. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. And you just keep going on this hamster around and round and round on this hamster wheel, and you can never get off because you're constantly just in that same loop, right? And it's difficult,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So again, going just back to my own experience, it was finally just saying, okay, like deal with what's inside and then let's move. And that's why I was able to move forward and adopt this approach, right? Like
Hmm. And luckily,
just
you had somebody extremely talented in your corner because
yes.
for those of you that don't know Andrew that she's referring to, Andrew Coates,
Right.
definitely recommend following. If you guys want to just take a brief pause right here, Andrew Coates on Instagram. He's the jacked redheaded guy. But anyway, he did like some Jedi mind tricks there by meeting you where you were at, which I think a lot of
Yes.
people don't put enough value on. Where it's like, okay, you're interested in fitness for like potentially for weight loss, great. Let's just work out. And then let's just have some conversations around nutrition and kind of see where your head's at and maybe dispel some beliefs and then get a little bit of buy-in and then bang, we're off to the races.
Yes, like his approach, yeah, there's some magic there, but I never, I was still 200 plus pounds when I started working out with him, and never felt judged. I was still insecure a little bit, but I was starting to kind of adopt that mindset where I was just more focused on me now, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I was starting to not care about everything else, and because of that um I was able to go do that, and like he just yeah, he is everything. Whatever he portrays himself as, that is him. He's so kind, genuine. Definitely met me where I was at, and like I love that because even now with my own coaching, that's what I try to do is like meet you where you're at. And like I have my own personal mantra, which is like work within the parameters of your life. And I that came to me while I was driving to a session with him because all of a sudden now I am, establishing all these habits. So I'm tracking, I'm drinking more water, I'm walking more, and now I'm starting to strength train. And it was like, oh, how am I going to fit in like 3 workouts a week? I still have a little baby. My season of life was still like a new mom, a lot going on. And yeah, so as I'm driving, I'm just like, fuck it. No, I'm going to do what I can with what I have, as long as I'm doing something. And the caveat being, I'm not using it as an excuse to not do the thing, right? Because that can easily happen.
I love
And
that.
yeah, so that was, yeah, it's been an incredible experience. And I'm where I am because of my relationship with him. So, yeah, life changing.
Yeah. Hey, this is why coaches can be one of the best investments in the entire world. It could quite literally change your life if you find the right person. Now, I know one of the things that came up when you were talking about that I was thinking of, I'm like, that is so true that a lot of people get caught up in not thinking about themselves, just thinking about what other people are doing, what everybody else seems to be doing that seems to be working for them. And there's this long list of shoulds. Like, I
Hmm.
should be doing this. I should be doing that. And if I'm not, I feel like a failure.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And that's that same, when you're still working on yourself, right? And I think like it's never a weight loss journey. It's just encompasses so much more. And a part of that is starting to focus on yourself and stop comparing yourself to the next person. And because even what that next person is doing, like, you have no idea, right? And I've heard this somewhere, so I don't know where, but it really resonated with me, is that, well, you see a small aspect of what that person is doing, even me or even you, right? When people are watching our social media. Um, but if you want to get to where they are, you have no idea. You have to do like 99% of the other things that you don't know that they're doing, or the type of life they're living, or what they're giving up, or what they're, compromising, right? And so that really hit hard with me. And that's something that I learned just working on myself. So yeah, it's a weight loss journey, but it's also been a really big inner healing journey for me.
Yeah. And I think
So
a
yeah.
lot gets lost in, especially social media, because all we see is the finished product. We don't see, like, for example, like martial arts, like you see a black belt, you know what that signifies. And you're like, that person put in years and years and years, but nobody's wearing a black belt when they are showing off their abs on social media. Okay. And then there's all these
Yeah.
white belts looking at them saying, I should be that good by now. And you're like, that's not how this works.
No, and even us coaches, like, there's so many coaches, women coaches, that are like jacked, and it's awesome. And I remember thinking, oh, I want to look like that, especially after the conference. I was like, shit, I want to look like that because I love it, right?
Yep.
But I also know how much work that takes, and what you would have to do, and how much the commitment and the consistency, all of that you have to put in. Um, so the person looking outside in, and I know a lot of female coaches, they also stress, like, I've been at this for 7 or 8 years, so I can eat 2,500 calories or 2,700 calories, right? I can go, not that you can't either, but it seems like some of them are eating it a lot more often.
Yeah.
And so you're not getting the whole picture, right? And so I think that's difficult for a lot of people looking up from the outside in. I know we do our best to put that out there and say there's a lot of context and nuance that's missing. So as a client or someone watching that, I don't know, like, how do you communicate that?
Yeah.
Like,
It's tough
it's
because if you
hard,
don't
right?
see it for yourself, I know personally, some of the people I idolized, I never really understood where they were coming from. And then they say in a podcast or in a talk, they're like, by the way, I had a terrible eating disorder for like all of my teenage years and my 20s. And I always feared getting fat, which is why I have abs like year round, because my brain won't let me go there. And I'm like, all right, well, that's a trade-off I wouldn't want to make.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, if someone just followed someone for long enough, maybe they'd get a better understanding of where someone's coming from. But if we are just looking at people's accounts and, not really diving in, and unfortunately, if you're still living with that quick fix mentality, you're never going to dive in deeper. Your attention span is going to be for that first three
Yeah.
seconds or 1.5 seconds to,
We're all going to be at the
the hook.
surface. We're just going to be stuck at the surface.
It's true though, right? It's true. And some people that I've spoken to in my circle, they were just like, okay, wow, I did not know that. I so because I'm sharing a lot on my social media. I always say I don't journal, but that's exactly what I'm doing, right? Putting it all out there.
Hey, journals come
And
in
even
many
then,
forms.
that is what I realized. So, um, yeah, it's quite the thing, wrapping our heads around what we see and what's really behind the scenes.
Yeah. And would you say, because when it comes to breaking through the surface, I know a lot of people are just kind of stuck there and they're like, I don't know how to do the deep work. I don't know like what to do. Obviously, journaling is incredible. Are there any other things that you've done like in the beginning of your journey, or that you wish that you did, that really would help you kind of get in tune with what exactly you need to work on?
In the beginning, I did actually read a couple of books, and one book was really just like transforming for me, Life-Changing. It's a book by Dr. Shafali. I believe it's called A Radical Awakening. And it talks a lot about, and Indian, I'm not sure. But she talks a lot about culture and how we believe what we believe, why we believe what we believe, and questions a lot of it. Questions like the conditioning. And so for me, that was really powerful, and it translated, or, for me, into my weight loss journey as well, not just like personally, but also, why do we believe what we believe? Why do we believe carbs are bad? Why do you believe sugars are, sugar makes us fat or carbs make us fat? Like, who said this? Which is huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of, for me, that was, that was life changing. But then as I progressed through my journey, I'd say that it was, initially I also deleted all my social media.
Because that's a
So doing
great
an audit.
idea. Great idea if you want to start a
Yes,
coaching business, just start from scratch.
I know, right? I didn't even have it in mind though back then, but I just like deleted everything. I deleted everyone I was following, unfollowed them. They weren't following me. And then what I did was, because at that time I was also working with Andrew, um, and with his guidance and just in general, I was able to follow accounts and people that were more evidence based, and and then the algorithm started working for me in that sense, right? It was feeding me stuff, not the garbage. And I know you shouldn't get your nutritional information, I don't know, your advice on social media, but sometimes I disagree. I think if you're following, reputable professionals, I think it's a good place. Like, it helped me
Absolutely.
a lot,
Absolutely. I mean,
right?
if you follow the right people, they put out really good information in bite-sized amounts, so it actually hits a little bit better than forcing yourself to read a textbook. Like I remember
Yes.
going through like precision nutrition and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of really good stuff here. But then following Krista Scott-Dixon and listening to John Berardi in little bits and pieces, I'm like, this puts it all in the right place.
Yes, I agree. And that's the same thing. Like, I did the PN1 certificate too. And, and then after following the accounts and stuff, it's like, wow, like all these little things are, they are making sense. And it's true. And listening to podcasts, I do a lot of podcast with kids. I mean, I'll just put something in my ear and, so that, and, so I disagree with the opinion. It's unpopular that social media isn't where you should get your advice. Right, people,
Yep.
you can,
Well,
right?
I like that
I mean,
topic though, because I think that
yeah,
a lot of people can take something from that and be like, all right, we're just going to go down the social media. Like, whenever you catch yourself seeing some of this like fad information, unfollow it immediately. Try and get it off your screen as fast as you possibly can. So there's no feeding into the algorithm of, oh, they like to watch this. They've been watching this for a while, or they liked this, or they commented on it. Because a lot of people don't realize, when you like hate comment, the algorithm thinks that you like it because you're engaging. So even if it's something that drives you nuts, like if you're like a Trump person and you like talk all the smack on Biden or vice versa, they're going to keep feeding you that stuff because you keep commenting.
exactly. Exactly, exactly. So, I'd recommend it, but I'd recommend doing an audit, right, of what you're looking at, and if you're searching for quick fixes, then that's all you're gonna see. So, I don't know, like, what else?
Well, let's
Well, I
talk
mean, I
about
wouldn't.
what are some accounts that like you followed that really helped you out? Like in particular, the big
Oh,
ones. If somebody's like, "Oh,
the
I
big.
want to follow whatever she followed,"
So it's funny because, like, obviously Andrew, right, and then
at Andrew
he
Coates
gave me the
Fitness.
tip. Yeah, Andrew Coates Fitness. He gave me the tip, like, look at who's following who, right? Because that they're going to be following the same similar type of people, and so that could be your hint that, okay, yeah, go for it, right? Check them out. Um, Big accounts. You know what? Oh, I don't know. I can't think on the top of my head, but
It's okay. I could kick it off with some because I know Renaissance
yeah, yeah,
Periodization was a really good one. They're mostly on the joking side now, but they put out some good stuff every once in a while.
yeah, they do. Yeah,
Precision
yeah.
Nutrition.
I think precision. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think though, for like the just Gen Pop, there's a lot of I mean, Beth Feraco, she's great, but not everyone will relate to her. just
If
because
you
of
have
this.
any problem with the F-bomb so far, you're not going to
So,
like her, but she does
right?
put out really good stuff.
Yeah, and there's one that oh, you know who I Fit for Jesse is actually, this is an interesting story. She is actually someone who I was following and really resonated with her, love her content. And then I actually saw Andrew's post. She reposted something of Andrew's, and then that's what actually led me to Andrew. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found him. And the other thing is, I listen to podcasts, and then if I like the guest, so if you have a couple of podcasts that you listen to, and then guests that come on, that's how I found you. That's how I found who am I thinking here? Gosh, the names are just slipping. But everyone that kind of runs in our circle, right?
Yeah. So in
And
short,
Daniel,
once
right?
once you guys are done with this podcast, just go down the list. Just follow every single
Yeah.
person we've had. Because to your credit, Doll, like that's literally what I do for the guests is like who follows who, who's friends with who, and it usually leads you in the right direction because people don't trust people that they know are not good sources of information.
Right? Yes, exactly.
And you said
So
Daniel
I think
too? Or were you saying Daniel
Daniel,
Yores?
Yores, Adam, who else? I met great people at the conference there, that I started following, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
And speaking of the
it's
conference,
crazy.
Aram is another good one to
Yeah.
follow too. If you like really
Oh yeah.
like to the point, like and some really good analogies, then Aram is your guy. At 4 weeks to the beach.
Yeah, and he has his style, right? Like some people may not resonate with that. Also Jimmy's awesome too.
At
So
Jimmy
just so
Nutrition.
many great people.
These are all going to be.
Jimmy, yeah.
This is going to
Let's just put
be
it all
by
there.
far the most work I've ever put into the show notes. We are going to have all of these people down there.
Yeah, definitely. And and then do your own research. Go see who they follow.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that being said, what are some red flags? If somebody's like, I don't even know what to look for when somebody has a bad account that I probably shouldn't be following, what were some things that you caught that you're like, yeah, I probably shouldn't follow this person?
Yeah, so I mean, we can talk about this in terms of just our mindset as well, but it all kind of is interrelated, but like the dichotomous thinking, right? Like the black and white, the good and bad foods, the people that are out there just demonizing one food.
But don't you know all of
Well,
our
we
food's
know,
toxic?
right? Like, and saying, oh, don't eat freezer food, just eat fresh, just eat organic, don't eat organic. Oh, it's yeah, sometimes I get tired of like looking at that stuff, but it's just out there. There's so much of it, and I think those are big red flags, is really because we try to teach like there are no good and bad foods. There's just foods that have more nutrients than the other food, and the other food that doesn't have that many nutrients isn't going to keep you full, right? Like
Yeah.
that's
It's
it. But
understanding the trade-offs at the end of the day. It's like, is
right.
this donut going to make you feel as good as this apple? Probably not. But have you been starving yourself and you want to make room for that donut so that you can get that satisfying the craving and tell yourself, I'm not going to gain fat by eating this donut? Then that has a lot of benefit too. What type of person are you in? What place are you in? And where does this make sense in your diet?
Exactly, exactly. That was a huge though shift for me too, right? I think that's a big thing that we struggle with was the good and bad foods, right? Or oh, I was so good today.
Ugh.
Well, why? Because
Ugh. I got
right?
like a little,
And
I don't know what, like a little ick there.
yeah, this is what we're conditioned though, and that's the type of vocabulary and the words that come out of our mouths and the thoughts that are in our heads. It used to be like that all the time. I'm not saying I don't have like slip ups. I wouldn't I wouldn't say they're slip ups. Now what I refer to them as is that I'm making a conscious decision. Like I went out on the weekend for my birthday. I drank too much, probably ate more shitty food than I should have. But I also knew the consequences of that, right? I also knew that probably going to be a write off the next day, which I was. um, and I also and I also knew that that this isn't going to continue for the next 5 days or a month or 6 months, which was what used to be my pattern in the past,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, and so just getting rid of that, not getting rid of it, but working on that mindset shift,
Yeah.
right? That's
And I,
huge. How do you,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
just gonna
go
say,
ahead.
I think it also just comes down to that like ownership of it. Like you said, you're saying, I am making this decision because you're within control. And I think a lot of people get
Right.
stuck in that trap of like, if I'm not perfect all the time, I'm out of control and I don't know how to do this because it's not my fault. I have all these factors against me and I just don't know why this keeps happening. Instead of saying, I know
Yeah,
what's going to happen if I choose to do this and that's okay, or I should probably make some changes or strategize.
exactly. That all or nothing mentality is just
Yeah.
dominates,
And that's what
dominates,
the
I think.
fad diets prey on. They want you to feel
Yes.
powerless. Like the only solution is what they're selling.
Oh, yes. Our insecurities,
Yep.
right?
Get red.
Like,
Oh, here's a good one
uh,
if you guys are looking for a big red flag. If you see anybody promoting, you want to get bikini ready, you want to get summer body ready, where it's like basically making you think, oh, I look like shit right now. I got to step my game up.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it works for some people, I guess. I mean, there's a marketing ploy in there. But who is it attracting,
Yeah.
right? Like what kind of client is it attracting? And is it gonna stick? Like I feel like coaching just goes beyond losing, 10 pounds just to have a summer body in four
Yeah.
weeks,
And
right?
what's
Like
that messaging saying? Like, okay, you're going to get summer ready and then you can just not do anything and go right back to the way you were.
exactly. Whereas like Aram's handle, like his whole messaging is get to a place where if you have something coming up or the summer's coming here that you can, do the things you need to do within reason and in a healthier way and be ready in four
Yeah.
weeks, right? Not like I have been neglecting myself all these years and now in 4 weeks I'm gonna drop 20
Yeah.
pounds.
I think his is probably
Yeah.
the only company in good conscience that could message that way and be like, all right, they're solid because he's literally 4 weeks to the beach. But it's such a good message where it's like, you're just ready all the time because you live a lifestyle that is not that far off where you make slight tweaks. And then for 4 weeks, bang, you're ready and you're feeling extra confident from that, what, 5-ish pounds being down.
Yep. Yep. And I love that. And like I am so happy and just relieved that I'm in a place in my life now that if something comes up or, whatever, like I'm not, like we talked about before, in my head and now struggling to find that solution right now. Like, oh, I have 2 months, like I got to do what I got to do to get it done. Right. And constantly stuck in that cycle. It really is. It's really life changing. And, that kind of, takes us into like maintenance, right? That's what maintenance
Yep.
is.
Well, what is that? It's
And
this mysterious thing that like a lot of people have no concept of because like you said before, it's always gaining, losing, gaining, losing.
I had no idea what maintenance was like. Forget about the definition in terms of like fitness, nutrition, but just in general, like to be able to eat at a level or in a calorie range that is comfortable and you feel good and you feel fulfilled, mentally, physically. Yeah, and it's not just that. Like, there's just so much more to maintenance. It's freedom. It's the freedom from um, the thinking that you're constantly thinking, "Am I going to get fat?" Or it's a freedom from food, right? Like that food noise. Not necessarily in the sense that you can't stop thinking about food, but food in the sense that like if I eat this, I'm going to gain weight, or if I eat that, and so maintenance is something that many, 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 many women, I think a lot of women, men too, that have no idea, because they're always living in two
Yeah.
extremes. And I think we need to talk about it
And I
more.
think the other thing too that deserves a lot of attention is the maintenance mindset because like myself, for example, I was always like that guy that was forever on a diet. And I was always thinking, I'm dieting, but the scale wouldn't budge. So technically maintenance, and that's kind of the classic situation where people are like, well, if you're saying you're in a calorie deficit for years and you haven't lost a pound, you're not in a calorie deficit, obviously. But the mindset of feeling like
Mhm.
you're in a diet weighs on you.
Yes. Yes, it does. It really does. So, uh, of course, I've experienced that a lot, but just even on my journey in the beginning, I kind of went through that as well because having still not understood like the whole calories and evidence-based nutrition yet, so still early in my journey, I was constantly throwing myself out of a deficit because I would be really good all week or 2 weeks, and then I would kind of blow it on the weekend, right? Not like totally blow it, but I would put myself at
Mm-hmm.
maintenance, so I would just now coast. Now I'm coasting for like another week or two, right? And then I'd do it again, or then I'd be successful for longer. And then, so I didn't understand that concept initially. I get it now, and I get some people do need those maintenance breaks or diet breaks, whatever you want to call them, just for peace of mind or just being like mentally exhausted, right?
Absolutely.
I got to that point in my last fat loss phase. That was the first actual, oh my God, what is that?
I love these new random like things that happen on the phone cameras. You're like, well, that's new.
Yay!
For anybody that's not seeing this,
Uh,
because it's going to be up on YouTube, but for anybody that didn't see that, there were some fireworks going on in the background.
I win.
That's your phone saying, you go, doll, you're on fire.
I know. But my last fat loss phase I did, and even prior to that, I actually did a dedicated maintenance phase for months. Like had never done that before. And then I did a dedicated fat loss phase where I knew I was gonna get in, get out, and I I really had to dial it in. And yeah, and so now, but by the end of it, by the end of the 10 weeks there, like I was exhausted, like just mentally. I was just like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. But I knew there was an end date, an exit strategy,
Yep.
right? So yeah, yeah, it's maintenance is where it's
Yeah.
at.
Maintenance has a lot of benefits. And I think people like just view maintenance as, oh, so I'm not really doing anything or accomplishing anything when there are a ton of benefits. Like, what were some of the wins that you experienced when those calories were finally able to be raised? Like, how did your body respond?
Really well. I found that I was just lifting more, felt more energy. Um, Also just mentally, like I said, like I felt good. I felt like, wow, like I can incorporate this amount of food, which I didn't think, that a lot of women don't think that they can eat as much as they can, even at maintenance. They always think that for some reason, whatever you diet at is what you end up at
Yeah,
maintenance,
that's the
which
plan,
makes
right?
sense
Just go on a
because,
diet and never stop eating that way.
yeah, and because we're so used to it, well, that's what we believe. And these are a lot of the misconceptions, though, that, I think prevent women from seeing through that barrier, kind of that's keeping them stagnant and at where they're at as well. But yeah, just a lot of energy. My lifts got better, more PRs. Yeah, it was just really like eye opening for me, as well as for some of my
Yeah.
clients.
My personal favorite is when all
Yeah.
of a sudden the sleep gets better for those that really
Oh, the
struggle.
sleep.
Like when you go from depriving yourself for over and over again and then overeating and you're out of that vicious cycle and you're like, all right, my body's getting a nice steady stream of calories and there's no diet stress going on. All of a sudden it's like, so 7 to 9 hours happened for the first time in 20 years. And you're like, wow.
You know what? That is so true. It's huge. It's huge. I've been maintenance now for it'll be 8 weeks from the last fat loss phase, and I can tell too, like just sleeping so much. But I mean, I wasn't the greatest sleeper anyways, but even if I get 6 hours straight, like that's a huge win for me, right? Yeah, so the sleep was great, just the energy levels, everything. Life is just
Yep.
better.
Life is just so much
Life is
better on the
great.
other side.
Mind you, though, my plan was to stay at maintenance now for at least like 6 months, 8 months, and just focus on like just building muscle and stuff. But I might as well talk about this because I think it's interesting that we're going into wedding season. right? So it's a
Well, by
big
the
thing
time
for
this
people
airs,
to
we're going
kind
to
of,
be like prime wedding season. This is going to be what, like
okay.
4 or 5 weeks from now. So we're going to be in June. So, oh boy.
All right. So wedding season, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you want to fit into certain clothes, look good. Like, I'm all about it. Everyone that says don't do it for aesthetics, yes.
Yeah.
Don't, maybe not do it for aesthetics only. Like, if you have other shit going on, deal with it. Um, but I've always, I started off wanting to do it for aesthetics, of course. Like, you want to look good, feel good, all of those things, right? Um, and I'm also not saying don't necessarily do it for an event if that's the only reason you're doing it either, right? Like, if you have other issues,
Well, it's
deal
like
with
use it
those.
as a
But
kickstart, not as the only reason.
only, yes, that's a good way to put it, right? And so um going into it now, Indian wedding season is just crazy, right? Like, we don't just have one event or two events. It's like 5, 6, 7 days, or can be. So I do have a wedding coming up at the end of the summer that I'm going to, and I have some outfits, but some are either too big, can't be taken in enough, or some are too small, can't be taken out enough. And after talking to my coach, I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Because I just kind of got out of fat loss phase and didn't really want to go into one. But at the same time, I was going to go into a fat loss phase at some point. So I'm just going to do it now because I don't want to spend thousands of dollars on outfits when I can just fit into the ones that I have. So I think that's like a valid reason. So I'm not doing it for something, but I'm doing it for my own reasons,
And you're in
right?
control. You can
Um,
say, hey, this is the way my year looks. And based on what I want and my goals, I'm going to do this. And I know that it works for me and it's controllable. And then I'm going to come right back out of that when it's all done.
yeah, and like I was not like I was in maintenance before, did well, just have been in maintenance since, and I'm doing great. And so that's the biggest shift, like you said, the
Yeah.
control. Like, you are in control, and that's huge, and that's really empowering because that's something that I completely lacked in so many, different I don't know, areas of my life, right? And so just knowing that I do have that control is a huge factor. So thank you for
Yeah.
pointing that out.
Absolutely. Because
Yeah,
it feels like
and
sometimes you just have zero control of the situation and you feel helpless. And there's a lot of people that are in that place. And it can literally change your life when you know what to focus on. So you do have that control.
exactly. And like, when you're chasing quick fixes, or you're in that mindset, that's just it. Going back to what we were talking about before, like, they have control over you. You don't have control over that, right? And so that's the difference. And so when you're working with a coach, or you're doing it in a way that now you understand all of these variables and food choices, and you're dealing with your mindset issues, yeah, it's very
And
empowering.
I'm
Lots to
glad you
learn.
brought that up because it made me think of something good where it's another, like, we've been talking about red flags a little bit, but one really good green
Yeah.
flag, if you have a coach, is if they have like a transition phase where it's like they teach you how to take the reins, not I'll tell you everything, don't worry about it. And then when you're not with them, you feel
Right. Right. Exactly. Mike Dola has talked about this too. Some coaches say, like, they're not going to take on clients without putting them in a maintenance phase, right?
I
Well, I
mean,
mean, some don't need
yeah,
it,
I don't subscribe
right?
to that thinking because it is all
Yeah.
based on that reverse diet concept, which has been like 1,000 things before it, not disproven, but shown that it's not as big of a impact as we thought it was. And the people that really feel it are freaking competitors, the ones that have done bikini shows and stuff like that and dieted themselves down, not people that are stuck in 200s chasing Wonderland.
Yeah, and if you have worked on the things that you need to work on with your client, and helping them understand, they know they're going to be at a point where they know that the scale's going to go up, like, because you've talked to them about it, you've discussed these things, and they understand that now, and it's not something that affects them. So why go through all of that? But even, and it's all individual based as well, right? Like you obviously meet your clients where they're at. For example, like I started with a couple clients around Christmas time. So we just did maintenance. Why would I put them in a fat loss phase? Like, that's a huge month. And anyways, these clients are normally, most people aren't even tracking. So even if they track at maintenance, they're going to lose weight.
Exactly. I know
Right?
that seasons of the
So,
year are very underplayed, but they do make a big difference where it's like we're about to head into summertime and it's like, are you going to be in the gym for hours a day? Probably not. But can you get like a beach workout in
no.
or go for a walk or a hike now that it's nice out? Yeah. And that's part of the season.
Right, right. And like just recommending those kind of things. And now obviously I'm going into this fat loss phase, but I also know myself that I know how to navigate things, right? Like I know how to navigate alcohol or special events or things that come up that aren't, that I hadn't scheduled or didn't know. And these are the things that you learn over time with practice. And there's like a foundation you have to kind of, start at, right? Like we can't, yes, you can go into a fat loss phase right away, which I think is great for some people, but at the same time, they also have to learn all of these things. And yeah, so going into summer now and wedding
Mm-hmm.
season, um, sorry, hopefully you can hear
That's
me.
okay.
I'm getting it. Can you see me on video?
No, I cannot.
Okay, just one second.
Yeah,
There we go. You'll have
we
to
were
edit that
going
out
too
because we had
strong. That was
a
the problem. It was no issues until that point. We jinxed it.
That was actually I think our Canadian safety alert thing, emergency alert thing that we were gonna have today.
uh,
So, but yeah, just going back to going into wedding season and summer season, like the results are possible, and if you start now, what are we, May, end of June, and right into July, now you'll have 2 months is enough to just at least establish the
mhm.
basics, right? And learn the fundamentals to help you kind of through the summer and at least maintain weight because maintaining is still
Exactly.
progress.
I'm very happy you said that because I think that's a thing that also gets downplayed too is when people are like, I'm just not seeing any change on the scale. When it's like before you were paying attention, you would have seen that scale gradually go up and up and up as time went on. But now we've put a
Right.
pause on that, which we've stopped the bleeding. Like that's a win.
Yes. Huge win because that means that you're you're actually thinking about the foods that you're eating. You're thinking about what you're putting into your mouth. Maybe you're pausing and reflecting when, you want something so you're not being completely reactive. All of these things are mindset shifts and things to be proud of and things to see as progress, right? Like we don't often see that. Even myself, like those are things that I had to learn too. Like, wow, I would never have done this before. And now, and
That's
yeah,
okay.
so what did I do in the past that I'm not doing now?
Mhm.
Right? Like those are things that we have to reflect on. And we fail to see that,
Yeah, because
progress
there's so many
and those little
wins
things.
happening that get downplayed, that get missed because we're so hyper focused on the weight. It's just got to see the scale, got to see
Yeah.
the scale go down when it's like you can get so many good things in place, like you said. And I think this is really where the reverse dieting or getting people into maintenance from the start really has its value when people don't have to stress
Yeah.
about being in a deficit and they can work on all these other factors. It makes it easier.
Yes, for sure. Can I share one story with you?
Absolutely.
Because I don't know. So I'm going to talk about things that maybe people that haven't been in a position that are not overweight or have never been overweight. And I was sharing this story with my sister, and she's like, "Oh, it's the small things," and I was like, it's actually not the small things for people that all their lives they had to find ways to do things differently because so for example, I take my son to swimming after we have to change, and they're when they dry themselves off and try to put their sweatpants on, like it's really sticky. It's hard to put their clothes back on. So I just crouched down, right? Like on both. both legs, both feet, and I was able to get down to get the pants in his feet and up. But something that I wouldn't have been able to do before ever. I would either have to put him on an elevated surface so that I didn't have to bend down, or I couldn't bend down, or I'd have to like support myself with one arm, put one knee on the ground. These things that seem small for the average, healthier, the fit person, they're really not for someone who's carrying excess weight, right? And so, like, that's progress. I was like totally stoked about it.
Absolutely.
I was just like, wow, like this is awesome. I can't believe I can do this. And it's because one, I've lost the excess weight, but two, because I've been strength training, right? Things like
Mm-hmm.
squats, lunges, all of those things allowed me to stay in that kind of crouch position for an extended period of time. Yeah, which was great.
That's
So
huge because that's
huge.
something that the scale's never going to tell you, and it can help having milestones like that where it's like you might not notice it ahead of time and be able to have the foresight to be like, oh, I'm going to make this aspect of my life easier. But if you can think of areas of your life, anybody listening, where it's like, I don't want to have to do this compensation because of how I look or how I feel, then having that as a milestone can make a world of difference when you reach that point, even if you're not seeing a change in the scale or whatever.
I love that. Yeah. Even, and there's always what seems like little things that are actually really huge, right? Even an amusement park, like fitting into the chair, like the swing chair, right? I would never have been able to do that before. And these are things like, don't get me wrong, I haven't been heavy all my life. Of course, you know my history of yo-yo dieted, right? So I've been really thin, really, but I was at my largest when I started this journey, and for an extended period of time. And so now that I'm having these moments, I really have to take a step back and like just pause and really take it in, because it's really surreal. And so, you want to talk about non-scale victories, like there you go, right? And it's hard to see. I know, like we can talk about it all we want, and we can say, do this so that you can do this later in life. And it's nice to share that, and hopefully it resonates with someone, and maybe motivates them to take that first step. I think is key, and why I always share all of these things. Even if it's just to motivate them to take that first step, they'll get where they need to go eventually. But it might not be the thing that really convinces anyone, right? Because they actually have to go it through themselves and get to that point, and then look back and say, oh wow, like I can't believe I am
Yeah.
where I
And I
am,
think that
right?
early hit of success is super important too. Like I know you had Andrew and he was probably like coaching you up from the start and you were getting all these wins and pointing them out. But I think for a lot of people,
Yeah,
they got to have that first hit of like, all right, this is working. And that's the thing where I think like the reverse
yeah,
diet / maintenance beginning doesn't really hone in on, because there's a lot of motivation and inspiration in the beginning and you need something to be like, hey, this is working.
right, right. And so that's why sometimes for some people it's just kind of nice to get into that deficit and then start working on the other things, as you progress,
Exactly.
right? So yeah, it's
And
huge.
I definitely wanted to go into certain tips and tricks that have worked for you, but in all honesty, I feel like we can still go into them, but I think that a lot of people think that these tips and tricks are going to make a world of difference when in reality, the thing that makes the difference is caring enough to turn that part of your brain on. Because then all of a sudden you
Yeah,
start finding
I
them, like the little tips and tricks. Would you agree?
I 100% agree. Like meal prepping or ingredient prepping or all of these things, they really don't come into play until, like you said, you actually like start and it resonates with you, and you get the ball rolling, right? Like those aren't things that are gonna actually move the needle for you
Mm-hmm.
initially,
Yep.
right? So that's how I feel. But yeah, for sure. I think those are all things that come eventually. And when you're in it and now you want to do it and you want to see more progress, and your motivation's always changing. It's never going to be the same. Your goals are never going to be the same. So, start with
Yeah.
what you got. That's what
Because
I say,
it goes back to
right?
what we were talking about, like with the shoulds, where it's like you should be meal prepping this way, you should be doing these tips and tricks. When it's like, no, if you go at it like that, that's short term. That's fad stuff. But if you're like, this makes my objectives easier and that's why I'm doing them, that's where the magic is.
100%. Well said.
So
Yes.
for you, what was that like when you started like making these like quick little changes? Like what were some things that you did that changed over time that made the journey easier, that you found fit into your life and your parameters really, really well?
So, I mean, not specifically, but more generally speaking, I know you don't have, not everyone needs to start small, but like I was super overweight, so I had to start small. And like I said, that all or nothing mindset dominates so many aspects of our lives. And I think it comes down to also, wanting to lose weight or get healthier, like trying to do everything all at once. That for me, like, I don't feel like that works. And so I always say start small. So that's what I did. I started walking. I started tracking my nutrition. I didn't look at the quality of my food when I started. Like I just tracked for the sake of tracking and staying within a,
If it fits your macros,
specific.
bro.
And I didn't even know what macros were. It was just like, hey, let's just get into the habit of tracking, right? And then later, as I started to understand, then eventually, once the weight started coming off and I felt like I could incorporate more and I started learning more, I was able to focus more on nutrient dense foods, right? More protein, all of these things, but they all it didn't all occur at once is what I'm going to say. So the key for me was just taking it one step at a time and then eventually just building on those habits. I know we hear this, see this all the time, atomic habits. It's all about building on, one habit and just letting it compound. And so for me, that was key. Yeah, I mean, if I ever have to give advice to someone and how I do things and how I coach, is that's exactly how I do it. Try to meet someone where they're at first and foremost, and then just build them up in every sense, not just like the basics, but also mindset and all of
Yeah.
those things.
I'm
It's
so glad you
yeah,
said not to do everything all at once, because again, that's a fad approach. That's a like quick fix approach.
yeah,
And like we talked about before, it's a leveling up. You got to start somewhere and add and work your way up to that next karate belt. Like you got to go to yellow belt and then blue
yeah.
and then purple or whatever order it's in. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but you can't just jump right to black belt.
No, no, like you can't just like for me, I couldn't just go to meal prepping and or ingredient prepping right off the bat. Like that's not something that I one had time for. Prepping and ingredient prepping came a lot later in my journey. But I found a way, and now I would say that I am the meal prep ingredient prep like expert. If you could see my freezer, with kids especially, I know a lot of moms have kids in a lot of different activities. The way I see it is, you plan for those activities, so you can also plan and prepare um, to have the things set up for you to succeed, to incorporate that into your lives as well. It's just a process, it takes practice, and it'll happen, right? But it's something that we can do.
Yeah, I
So,
remember
yeah.
seeing a post you did where you showed your freezer, and I'm like, that is professional level. Like, packed to the brim, everything's
Sales of my
labeled.
course.
And I'm like, not only is this impressive, this probably saves a ton of money. And I wish I could pull this off.
Yeah, I have a stand-up freezer, so I'm fortunate to have that. And I honestly, two tools, a vac sealer, like a vacuum sealer. And when I cook, I batch cook, right? Like if I'm gonna make a meal, I'm just gonna make more of it, and then I freeze it in portions, and then I vacuum seal it, and it's done. I'm busy. We're all busy. We all lead different lives, and the key is to be prepared, right? Like if you can't prepare and set yourself up for success, you're gonna have a hard time succeeding. You come home from work and now all of a sudden, like you have no groceries in your fridge or whatever you did prep is finished. Well, what can you do? I go downstairs to my freezer and just grab I make my pasta sauce at home. I'll just grab a portion of it. I just boil pasta. Done. Dinner done in like 20
Yep.
minutes, right? So, yeah, it's key to
Yeah, and I think a
success,
lot
right?
of people that struggle with meal prep like struggle just making space for themselves, and it just feels like that one extra thing that's just so overwhelming. But when you actually force yourself to do it that first time, and then now you have the space and the freedom to be like, okay, all my stuff is prepped, it's one less thing I have to think about, then you can continually do the habit over and over and over again. But that first time's tough, isn't it?
Yeah. It is, and it's really trying to find your groove, and but it also comes down to like changing our mindset um about the foods that we eat and kind of what we're entitled to eat. Like things don't have to be absolutely, you know, taste like so delicious, and everything has to be
Yep.
mouth-watering. And it's just kind of coming back to ground level and saying, okay, like let's just prepare a few items, ingredients. I do, potatoes, rice, some sort of vegetable mix, and protein. And then I use that to make different meals, like many of us do, right? But that's how simple it is. It's just
Yeah.
getting there, right? And understanding and realizing that is what you have to do. It's really basic, and just dropping the whole, I have to make, 20 ingredient meals. I have to make all this fancy shit that I see on Instagram. Or you see these moms that are making like all these homemade muffins and this and that. I do some of that stuff and I'll freeze it, but I don't have we all have different time, and I don't have a time to do all of that.
Yeah.
So do what you can, right? Just
And
work with what you got. And if we can come
if we're
back to
being honest,
yeah.
I mean, the people that we see making these intricate recipes that make it seem like, oh, it's so easy, why can't everybody do this? They are very, very privileged, and I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and privileged and talented, and like I don't have time to go buy, or nor the money to go buy 20 different ingredients that you're never going to use again, possibly, and then they're going to go in the trash, right? But we set ourselves up to this standard and compare ourselves and think this is the way we should be. And a lot of my like mindset has changed in terms of like I give zero fucks. I just don't care what people think. I'm going to do what I'm going to do from now on, right? Right now, like I don't wear sweaters anymore or cardigans to cover my arms. Would someone looking at me say, oh yeah, maybe you should? Okay, fine, whatever, I don't care. But I did for over 20 years, right? So it just comes down to getting to a place where you really have to stop comparing yourself and not caring about what others people think of you, and start focusing on yourself and just care about more about you, and you'll be more
Yes.
successful, right? I don't know, that's how I feel. Like, focus on you, care about you, and everything else
I
will
think that
follow.
might have to be the title of this podcast is just focus on you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now there
Right.
was a note that I had in here,
Totally.
and I really wanted to touch on it, and that is like when you are doing your meals and everything. I noticed when you did that one post with your freezer one is that it's not very basic, like bland food. There is South Asian cuisine in there that for some reason always gets thrown in with like Italian food, Mexican food, Asian food, South Asian food, and all these are like no-nos for so many things. And you
Yeah,
lose
okay.
culture when you do that. Like, how did you manage to keep it in the mix? And did it feel more fulfilling keeping it in the mix?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this actually, because I think it's huge. A lot of and this is, so a lot of the restrictive diets, as the structured diets, the diets that give you meal plans, they are chicken, broccoli, and rice, like plain, like no salt, no
Yeah. No
sauce, no
salt,
nothing,
nothing.
right? So I think no salt. Salt is king. No. So we think that eating bland foods, or those are the foods that we've been conditioned to believe that we need to eat to lose weight. And that is one thing that I found when I was doing that, is I always just reverted back. I felt sick, like I didn't want to eat that. I was like, oh, right, like, and so I gave up a lot of my cultural foods. And so then this time, like I said, no, I'm not doing that. I am going to incorporate these foods because my kids eat them. Like my kids eat rotis and I eat that and lentils, various things, butter chicken. So I just learned to prepare them in healthier ways for less butter, oil. It's all about your prep, right? Like you don't have to, you can still use oil, just measure it out.
Exactly.
And right, and even Chinese food, like Mexican food, any type of food, it can all be incorporated. I always say a tortilla is a is a roti in my culture. It's
Yeah,
something
it's
else in
like
someone else's
non. You could put it in the
culture.
category of
It's a
non
wrap,
and like I don't know what else.
right?
Any wrap.
A wrap. Exactly. So it's just prepared differently and consumed differently. And once we start to learn that, carbs don't make you fat, because a lot of this is carb related too, right? Eating it on rice and you think you can't have
And that's
rice
what blows
and
my mind because almost every single culture is carb centered. Like when we look at Hispanic culture,
Mhm.
it's a lot of rice, it's a lot of beans. When we look at Irish, like a lot of potatoes. Like out in Asia, a lot of
Right.
rice. Like there's people have survived on this stuff for years, and obesity is a very recent problem. So are carbs really the issue?
No, right? They're not. Like what the real issue is and what I, understand and what I try to teach my clients is that it's what are you attributing carbs to? Like so when we go off course, quote unquote, so now we're eating on the other extreme end, we're eating stuff like pizza, hamburgers, I don't know, what else? Cake, pastries. What do they encompass? Sugar, probably lots of oil, lots of butter, right? So there's more fat content, therefore more calories, therefore more,
Yeah.
calorically dense, right? And so now you're eating more of it because you're not full, and now you're consuming like a
Well,
shitload of
because it just
calories.
goes more
Whereas if you just,
commercialized. That equals more butter, more oil. And it's like, that's not how they were originally made.
yeah. And so like being able to eat naan at home, just and butter chicken at home. Honestly, it's so easy. There's so many store-bought sauces now that you can just throw in that are so authentic. You don't even have to go, and you don't have to use too much of it. You don't even have to prepare it from scratch. You just have to be more creative and more open to the fact that, yeah, like we can do this and we can do it with what we got and whatever we have access
Yeah.
to,
And
right?
also not
So,
fearing and not always going towards low fat or low calorie, where it's like, is
yes,
this the right amount of calories or is it way more than it should be? And are these servings micro servings or are they an actual real serving? Like, I know when we get the tomato sauce for like a pasta dish, it's like a full quarter cup, and I'm like, oh, this is an actual serving, not them playing gymnastics with the
yeah,
FDA and their labeling and everything where it's like, oh, one serving is
exactly.
a quarter second of a spray.
Right, right, right. And yeah, so why not just incorporate the things that you love? Just the caveat meaning like prepare
Yeah.
them at home. Measure what you use. Nothing's off limits. You can still use the oil and butter. Now, if you're going to order out, well, yeah, it's gonna have a lot of stuff that you have no idea. Like they don't even use butter for butter chicken. They dump oil in it.
It's a travesty.
Like I know that for a fact.
Well,
Right?
that's like with the
That's-
oil too, because olive oil is honestly like one of the best things that anybody can incorporate in their diet. But what they don't realize is that at these Italian restaurants, to save costs, they'll cut it with canola. So now you're getting less of a good
yes.
tasting product for double or triple or quadruple the calories.
Yeah, and that's what's happening. I mean, you have no idea how these things are prepared. And talking to people that actually work, behind the scenes, are like, yeah, we just dump like shortening in it. Like we don't even use butter. No one uses butter. It's so
Yep.
bloody
Yeah,
expensive,
I mean the only
right?
like quality
So.
butter that I've like been exposed to is something like Kerrygold, and you got to give an arm and a leg to get that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like, the first things first. I don't know, let's lose this mind, like educate people. I wish people would just understand that carbs aren't your enemy. And, I like this most recent fat loss phase, I actually went through every day and wrote down my carb intake, and it like averaged like 175 grams a day. Never went under I don't know, 145 or something. So most of the time I was over 200. Like you can eat your carbs, and just helping them understand that we just have to stay in a specific
Well, that's the
calorie
key,
range.
is
I don't
understanding
know.
what we can and cannot get away with and having a budget. Because if you don't have some sort of a
Yeah.
budget which gives context to all of this, then you're kind of operating in the wind where you're like, I think this is the amount of
Yeah.
calories I should need. Like, I always rip on my girlfriend for this. She'll like read something and be like, that's way too much fat. And I'm like, for what? Like, too much fat in what
Exactly.
context? And she's like, well, it's like X amount of percent of your daily whatever. And I'm like, are those your calories? And how much have we eaten throughout the
Yeah.
day? This is your first meal. How is this too much? And it's like, this is stuff people don't think about. We just have these arbitrary rules like floating around in our head.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of unlearning, right? A lot of unlearning to do. And that's just that's something that I think is difficult for many to do, and difficult for a coach as well. Like but it's something that we have to push through and just kind of keep putting out there, right? I had to
Yep.
unlearn a lot of things, a lot of
Because
things.
unlearning's harder than
So
learning.
yeah, it is, right? Like yeah, learning can just be anything that's thrown at you. Um, I'm a victim to this too sometimes, like whatever you see, like something pops up, you're like, whoa, really? And you really have to take a step back and like, no, that's not possible. Okay, moving on. But not a lot of people do that. And then they get stuck in that cycle and continue. It's amazing how many people think that carbs are still, well, it's not amazing because I was there too. I'm on the other side of it now. So, when I sit here and say that, it's like, I understand where they are at. Like, I get it. I get why they're thinking that carbs are fat, but like, how do we just break that? Like, how do we
Yep.
break through that? And how do we get to those people, right? Going back to
It's
what
the
we were talking
continual
about.
messaging, because it takes however, 7, 8 times for somebody to hear something and for it to actually sink in. And it just comes down to making sure people know the why behind everything. There's no magic here. There's no special
Right.
protocols that all of a sudden kick your body into gear. Like, it's just a bunch of marketing BS. And you need to understand why this stuff happens, not just assume, oh, this is the magic pill.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like I try to share my experiences and my journey so that I can be more helpful and provide more like context and um, to the whole situation and how I lost the weight and that it's possible. But I always come back to just it's basic. It is really boring day in, day
Yeah.
out, especially when you're in that dedicated fat loss phase. There's a lot of different approaches, but the principle is the
Yeah.
same, right? We can get there in many different ways. And Yeah, and I'll just continue to say that like I'm not selling a quick fix, and like you or like all of us, we're just saying like, listen, it really
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
basics. Let's just get
And
back to
boring
that.
is a
But
good thing on this journey, because you need a lot of mental energy for a
that's
lot
it.
of other things. Don't let nutrition and fitness consume your life. You just, what do you have to do today? X, Y, and Z? Done. Okay, now time for life.
Yeah, that's one thing I realized was um, that I hadn't for years, was that doing this all the time, or most of the time, is what actually allows me to really immerse myself and enjoy myself for the things that matter some of the time, right? And um, I was never there. It was always like I have never. My memories of special events and milestones are tainted by the number on
Yeah.
the scale, unfortunately, because I was always striving for a certain number. And then when I got there, and now when I look back, it's like I never immersed myself. I never enjoyed the food at these events. because I was afraid I was going to get fat by eating dinner and cake that one day. And then guess what would happen? As soon as everything was done and we were done with that, I would just go back to the regular stuff. And what did it cost me? It cost me not enjoying what I should have, because food is meant to be enjoyed, right? Like at weddings, special occasions, like that's what we kind of share. We all have that in common, and I never did that. And so now it's like, okay, I'm in a place where I'm content, and that's not going to happen anymore, because I understand that one meal is not going to, make me fat, or I'm not striving to lose weight for a certain event. So all of these things, we don't realize that what we're doing most of the time is what is going to allow us to enjoy those moments.
Exactly.
Some of the time, right? So yeah. So
boring works.
Boring works.
That might have to be the other title. But I'm glad that that's a really good spot to like cap this, because I feel like that encapsulates everything. But that being said, I can't let you go just yet, because we have a tradition on this podcast. I totally ripped it off from Diary of a CEO, but it is a very fun thing to do. We leave a question for the next guest without knowing who the heck they are. So this one comes from Alex McBrady. Did you get to meet him at a Real Coaches Summit?
Yeah. Yeah, It's awesome. Oh, I know it's going to be deep, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't lie. And if anybody listening right now hasn't caught that podcast, it's the one right before this. So go ahead and check it out. Alex asks, what's one thing you've wanted to try but haven't because it's terrified you? And do you have plans to conquer it in the future? And if so, how?
Oh, one thing that I haven't tried. Wow. Okay. I'm just going to preface this with these are things that actually my son asked me this question. What is it that you enjoy doing? And I'd say I have tried this, but it's very short-lived. So I want to try swimming.
Okay.
I don't know how to swim. I don't know how to swim. I always let my weight prevent me from taking it up, just because I wasn't that, ideal size. So that is something I want to do, and I plan to do. This is such a great question. I plan to do in the next couple of years, or even like the next year or so, when I have more care for my youngest son. So I'm really excited about that. And I think it's a fear as well. I think as an adult, when you don't know how to swim, it's a bit harder, right?
It's tough.
It's more difficult.
The more the years add up, the tougher it feels to like add on new things, but it's what keeps you young, right?
Yeah. And it's something that I always thought about. And I think that when you're overweight and you're kind of stuck in that cycle for years and years, you have this in your head where I want to do this or I want to do that. And that has always been in my head. So
love
that's
that.
what I'll be doing.
We're just going to have to schedule an episode exactly 1 year from now to make sure that you're following up on that. And we'll do a part 2.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Sounds good. When I see you at the Real Coaches Summit next year, we'll make it happen. Yes.
Throw me in.
That'll be the first question. It won't be, oh, it's so nice to see you, doll. It'll be like, so how's the swimming?
I'll just be like, oh, I just started my first lesson. No, I am going to.
Love it.
I promise.
It. Now, for anybody listening that's like, I want to see more of Doll. Like, I love what she's saying. I want her on my feed because I know she's one of the good ones. Where can they find you?
Honestly, I'm on Instagram, Nutrition Coaching by Dal. You can find me on Facebook as well. It's Dal Sekhon, Sekhon. But mostly on Instagram.
That will be on the show notes, as well as the laundry list of people that we mentioned throughout this podcast. I can't wait. I just really can't wait to put this one up. But thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much for popping on. I appreciate you taking the time. I know this is probably the longest guest one we've done in a while. So really appreciate you being so charitable with your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're
I had a lot of
very welcome.
fun.
And
Love it.
for everybody listening, as a thank you to Dal, all I ask is that if you guys at any point heard something during this podcast where you're like, oh my God, that hits home a lot. Or if you have that person in your head that's like, they're stuck in the fad diets, they're stuck doing the same thing over and over again, gaining and losing, go and send this their way and let them hear all the good stuff Dal talked about and tell them that Brian and Dal say hi. And we thank you ahead of time.
Yep.
So, yep. All right. That's it for this week. Thank you guys for making it all the way to the end. I'll see you all same time, same place next week. But until then, go kick some ass. See you later.